So what do paleontologists even do? I just don't really feel like they're accomplishing lots of things that are really relevant to the world today.
I don't really know why dinosaur research is important. I think the money would be better spent on cancer research.
Yeah, when I was little, I really liked dinosaurs, but at this point, like, nobody really studies them. They're not as relevant, so I grew out of it and I'm not interested anymore and I moved on to other things.
My name is Jessica Noviello. I'm a physics and earth and planetary sciences major at Johns Hopkins University, and I am a Woodrow Wilson undergraduate research fellow. And there's one other thing you need to know. I love dinosaurs. Always have, always will. My own studies in paleontology began at Stony Brook University with Dr. David Krause and Dr. Joseph Sertich. Then I came to Hopkins, where I conducted research under Dr. David B. Weissample, my mentor throughout my project. However, I realized that not everyone sees paleontology as I do, as a dynamic, fascinating science. I've spent the past year talking to paleontologists, getting inside of their heads, and asking them what their take on the field is, where they think it's going, what questions they want answered, and what their own experiences have been in the field. Join me on this journey around the country as we explore the people behind the bones. First stop, New York City. The American Museum of Natural History in New York City is home to the world's largest fossil collection. In fact, there's a 10-story building on the inner courtyard, and 7 of those floors are devoted just to bone storage. In every dinosaur documentary that I have ever seen, not one of them has taken the time to define what a dinosaur actually is. But the 5 main characteristics of a dinosaur are the twisted tibia, the perforated acetabulum and brevis shelf, the ascending process of the astragalus, and the deltopectoral crest. Dinosaurs can be further subdivided into 2 groups based on their hip orientation: the saurischian, or lizard hip dinosaurs, and the ornithischian, or bird hip dinosaurs. Oddly enough, birds are actually descended from the saurischian line of dinosaurs, not the ornithischians. A special shout out to Stegs Benedict II. Now, I know a lot of people say Dimetrodon is actually their favorite dinosaur, but I gotta say, it's not a dinosaur. It's a synapsid, which means it's more closely related to us than it is to any other dinosaur that we'd see in the American Museum of Natural History. This also means that animals like Postosuchus, pterosaurs, and plesiosaurs are not dinosaurs. It is very easy but very wrong to think that paleontology is only about dinosaurs, when in fact it's about invertebrate life as well, and also about mammals, which in turn will eventually lead us to discover more about ourselves. Behind me is actually a cast of the only known skull, in fact the only known piece of bone, of one animal called Andrewsarchus, which is believed to be an ancestor of, believe it or not, whales. But as interesting as those mammal fossils are, it's no secret that the dinosaurs are what steals the show. So this kind of tree is called a cladograph, and it's really important for phylogenetic systematics, which are tools that paleontologists will use to classify different organisms and also try to learn how they're related to each other. Now, every one of these branching points is called a node, and what separates 2 different branches of the node are different derived characteristics that are specific to that particular branch. If we go over here to tetrapods, this is where everything that walks on land today, everything that has flippers, fins, you name it, this is where it started. And one of the most famous fossils of tetrapods is Tiktaalik, which was actually pretty recently discovered. And there's one person who knows more about Tiktaalik than almost anybody else. And that guy is Ted Deschler at the Philadelphia Academy of Natural Sciences.
These 3 drawers, 1, 2, 3, are all one skeleton. Hadrosaurus volci, one of the best, earliest dinosaurs found on Earth. In the year 2000, our third of 3 camps that year, we came upon a site with abundant material on the surface and then more stuff that we could begin to excavate going down into the hillside. And we kind of established, okay, this could be a really good site to work. So we went back in 2002, started to excavate that layer and do some other sites as well around. One skull roof, it was just part of the snout, really intrigued us. And that's just the snout. One of the eyes would be here, the other one would be over here. This is the snout. Without that, we probably would not have gone back to the site that we had excavated in 2002. We would have known there was good stuff there, but nothing sort of on the fin to limb transition type stuff. But this was the first clue right there. We found this intriguing snout, and then in 2004, we went back again. And in 2004, excavating that same layer and just getting a little further into the hill, we found several specimens of the animal that once we brought all of that material back, prepared it, we had complete skulls, shoulders, parts of bodies of this amazing transitional form that we named Tiktaalik rosé. Really informative of the sort of stepwise progression of certain characters between finned and limbed animals, realizing that it's not just the fins and the limbs that are changing, but it's aspects of the skull, aspects of the brain case inside of the skull, aspects of the bones that are in the neck region, and so forth. So we're basically seeing in Tiktaalik rosé an animal that's got primitive aspects, tying it back to the finned, lobe-finned fishes, and then more derived aspects, tying it to the limbed, lobe-finned animals that we call tetrapods.
The Philadelphia Academy of Natural Sciences is a very big part of American paleontology history. In fact, the first dinosaur skeleton ever mounted in the world was right here in Philadelphia.
This is the mount in a workshop from back in the 1860s. And so you can see them kind of modeling up areas, then that skull way up on top is that iguana-like skull that they put on top.
The Academy was also the headquarters of Edward Cope during his battle against O.C. Marsh during the Bone Wars of the 1870s and 1880s. Both men were fighting to become the dinosaur king of the American West.
Lewis and Clark picked up this fossil.
No way!
Yeah, it's the only fossil from their expedition up the Missouri River.
Oh.
And it's actually just a piece of maxilla, upper jawbone, from a Cretaceous fish. One of those big teleos fish.
There's 6 countries on Earth that account for 75% of all dinosaurs. They're China, the United States, Argentina, Mongolia, Canada, and England.
Because we're just really lucky to have this deep history here at the Academy. So we've just got Leidy and Cope and all these different like classic paleontologists. A lot of their stuff is here. And again, these are the type specimens for many things that they described.
I was trained by John Ostrom, who was the greatest American paleontologist, dinosaur paleontologist of the second half of the 20th century. John Ostrom was trained by E.H. Colbert, whom I also knew very well. Colbert was trained by Gregory. Gregory was trained by Osborne. Osborne was trained by Cope, and Cope was trained by Leidy. So, I'm part of the chain.
These 2 cabinets are all the Thomas Jefferson collection. And many of them are mastodons. So, for example, mostly sort of isolated teeth or teeth in parts of jaws or the upper jaw.
But then Weishampel was trained by Dodson, and Whitmer was trained by Weishampel, and
there was nobody really asking scientific questions about it. And I think that was frustrating Jefferson, and it was particularly frustrating to Jefferson that the British and the French were starting to do something science-like, learning about these things and trying to say, well, what is it and where does it live and all that sort of stuff. And so Jefferson wanted the U.S., you know, some of the scientific minds here, the anatomists and stuff, to do it as well. So Jefferson commissioned Clark to make this collection. This was 1807, 1808. It all went back to the White House. So everything in this cabinet and the one next to it were in the White House when Jefferson was president. Isn't that cool to think that paleontology was that important at the time?
Utah is very important. Utah is certainly the most exciting and important place in the United States for new dinosaurs. So it's not like we finished in the United States, but it's just that the rate in China is greater.
One of the most famous dinosaur skeletons ever discovered is that of Sue, a Tyrannosaurus rex, and she lives at the Field Museum in Chicago, Illinois. I paid a visit there, but I may have gotten a little bit distracted.
So this is a fairly large basal sauropodomorph dinosaur, which we hope we have more of. We think we have a scapula now, but this was what was collected originally.
It's actually a little bit surprising. Here we are, you know, 4 hours from New York, Philadelphia, Washington, D.C., out in north central Pennsylvania, finding world-class fossils along the sides of highways. So yeah, you know, it is right in our own backyard where discoveries can be made in these cases. You just have to get out there and look.
So we are currently on our way to Calvert Cliffs, Maryland State Park. It is bordering the Chesapeake Bay, and it is a wonderful, extensive arrangement of Miocene deposits. In fact, it is the #1 most complete Miocene assemblage of rocks in the entire country. So great for fossiling, great for any kind of sedimentary geology buffs, so we're checking it out. We're gonna have a great time. So we finally made it to Calvert Cliffs. We are standing right here on the shoreline, and in the back you can actually see what is 15 million years of uninterrupted time in 3 different rock formations. It's absolutely gorgeous here. The ocean looks wonderful. So what's interesting to note about Calvert Cliffs is that there are actually no dinosaur fossils here. These rocks were deposited during the Miocene, which was about 23 to 5 million years ago, so it's still 18 million years of time. And what we mostly see are shark teeth. We see very modern day animals actually, such as raccoons and squirrels and ancient relatives of dogs, occasionally horses. Teeth are very common fossils here, but it's because they fossilize so well in general that we see many of them. So again, no dinosaurs here, but for anybody who studies mammalian paleontology, this is one of the best places to go. And luckily, it's a Maryland State Park. It's open year-round. It's beautiful here. I definitely suggest checking it out just once in your life if you're ever in the state of Maryland. It's definitely worth a visit. So what a lot of people might not realize about Calvert Cliffs in general, or about the entire Atlantic coastal plain province of Maryland, is that this area was once completely underwater. And that makes for some very interesting deposits and some very interesting fossils. Hunting down fossils is one thing, but hunting down paleontologists? That's something completely different. Luckily, the Society of Vertebrate Paleontology hosts an annual conference, and in 2013, that conference was in Los Angeles, California. So today is Halloween 2013, and I am in the sunny city of Los Angeles I am attending the Society of Vertebrate Paleontology SVP meeting of 2013. So far, it has been incredible. The annual SVP meeting isn't just for paleontologists. Museum exhibit preppers, authors, artists, book salesmen, and the volunteers and professionals who are responsible for cleaning the bones for paleontological study are also welcomed at this event. These men and women are the unsung heroes of paleontology. Without their hard work, the field would never have advanced. If you're ever in LA, definitely check out the La Brea Tar Pits. The La Brea Tar Pits have been bubbling away for tens of thousands of years, and have been capturing animals who unfortunately wander into its trap for that amount of time. But because of La Brea's sticky tar, we have an excellent understanding of the biology of Southern California from tens of thousands of years ago. Pit 91 is the most famous of the active sites. This is what Pit 91 at La Brea Tar Pits actually looks like. Pretty cool. Now, because it's all tar, and you can imagine asphalt is very sticky when it's wet, the fossils are actually very hard to clean. But due to the hard work of paleontologists and volunteers at the George C. Page Museum, we have an extensive knowledge of what life was like back here tens of thousands of years ago. And you may not think paleontologists would want to focus on something like this, but the truth is they want to focus on all kinds of ancient lives, not just limited to dinosaurs. Who could possibly be the leader of this wonderful and diverse group of scientists?
Kathy Forster. I'm an associate professor at George Washington University, and I'm the president of the Society of Vertebrate Paleontology.
One of the most memorable dinosaur movies ever made is the famous 1993 classic Jurassic Park, directed by Steven Spielberg. But there is someone who was the head scientific advisor for all of those movies, including all of the sequels that followed it. His name? Professor Jack Horner.
Just so you know, today I received, you might like to know, the script for Jurassic Park 4.
So it is the final day of SVP 2013, and I have to say I've had a blast so far. In fact, one of the biggest things that I noticed here at SVP is the number of young scientists who are here. And I expected it to be mainly comprised of many older, more experienced scientists, but actually there are a lot of young people about my age or slightly older in graduate school here. And it's great to see so many people my age getting involved in paleontology and asking some of the really difficult questions like, how did flight first develop? When do we see feathers occurring? How did dinosaurs survive at the poles? How did sauropod dinosaurs keep their body temperatures to a normal point so that they didn't die from denaturation of their enzymes? So really interesting questions being asked, really interesting methods being presented to solve some of these problems. And again, just a wide smattering of people. The energy has been fantastic. Everybody here is like a giant family. It's been great to be at SVP, and unfortunately, all good things must come to an end. There was only so much I could explore on my own. So I finally sat down with some of the experts and asked them what their experience in paleontology was like.
It went something like this. When I was a little kid, I got a plastic toy of a dinosaur, and it was either a plastic Tyrannosaurus or a plastic Brontosaurus, as we used to call Apatosaurus. And I can't remember which one was first. But I got it. I asked my mom what it was. She says, it's a dinosaur. Cool. I'm learning colors. I'm learning shapes. That's a dinosaur.
I got a set of plastic dinosaurs for Christmas when I was about 3 or 4 years old, and that was it. And I don't remember anymore whether the dinosaurs were given to me because I was interested in them or because if I became interested in them after I got them. But I remember that vividly, and I was always interested in dinosaurs. I have pictures of me as a little kid reading dinosaur books, so just past life always fascinating.
And then a couple weeks later, I got the other one. So if it was Tyrannosaurus first, it was Brontosaurus second, or vice versa. And I asked what it was, and she said it was a dinosaur. Well, this apparently puzzled me, that we use the same word for these two animals that are so different from each other.
I was 6 or 7, but I do remember drawing a lot of stuff and making little museums out of cardstock that my father would bring home from work, and I'd draw the little skeletons on them and then staple all the little cards together, and I'd have a museum.
From that, I decided I was going to grow up to be Tyrannosaurus Rex. And my parents said that can't happen, unfortunately. So I said I'd do the next best thing, and that is I would study dinosaurs, and specifically study Tyrannosaurus. And unlike a lot of people who make a life-changing decision at the age of 3, I kept with it.
As a child, paleontology was not something I was really intrigued with, but earth science was.
Oddly, one of the memories I don't have is that when I was 6 years old, I visited the Field Museum in Chicago. I lived in South Bend, Indiana. My father taught at Notre Dame.
So really it was probably late in life compared to many where I started to think, wow, I would like to study the history of life and connect that to the history of the earth, you know, see that the two are intertwined.
And I was impressed by the Field Museum, but what I remember is mummies. The dinosaurs didn't impress me for some bizarre reason.
Paleontology is the gateway drug of science, right? This is how you hook kids in. You know, for many children, their first experience of science, at least in the Western world, is learning to recognize Triceratops and Tyrannosaurus. And they often learn to do this before they can distinguish species of birds that live in their backyard. So, you know, 3-year-olds will be like, that's a bird. But they go to a museum, they can tell you which one's T-Rex and which one's Triceratops. And so in that sense, I think it gets people moving in that direction of thinking scientifically, of being able to classify scientifically. And then later in life, they go on and become, you know, nuclear physicists or what have you. But I think our science fulfills that role. And we, as the scientists conducting that science, you know, make it approachable and understandable for people that, you know, this is something you too could do if you wanted to.
One of the things that we wouldn't know about, one of the things that paleontology gives us, information paleontology gives us that no other field does, is the existence of mass extinctions. We could look at human history and see the extinctions of individual species or maybe devastation on particular islands or things, but nothing on the scale of a true mass extinction. It's never been witnessed, except maybe the early phases right now, in human history. Without a fossil record, we wouldn't realize that ecosystems can be entirely devastated with just a handful of survivors that take hundreds of thousands or millions of years to rediversify and reestablish stable ecosystems. That's something only fossils can give us.
But I understand sometimes you can look at paleontology and it can seem really dry. You know, you look at some shells and identify them. You look at some bones and identify them. But there's so much more to it. You know, what you're doing is you are using what's left. You're using the fossils, you're using the context of the fossils to try to find out what these animals were like as living creatures. And the animals we have alive today are just like this tiny, tiny, tiny percentage of everything that ever lived. And we can't unravel the history of life on Earth by just looking at the things that are alive today. We have to look at the history of everything through time, and we have to look at the fossils. There's our best record of learning how to wet arm through time.
Part of the problem with the success of the Cretaceous, the time they used to call it Cretaceous Tertiary, now Cretaceous Paleogene, extinction studies, on the part of the geochemists and the geophysicists, is they started to think that the paleontologists weren't necessary.
Life seems to me to be extremely adaptable and to respond quite readily to massive changes in what's going on in Earth history, except for, and I would consider these mass extinctions as those exceptions. You know, so you have these events where things are unable to respond. Mm-hmm. But what about all these sort of lower level events in between? And I think we don't understand that. That's really challenging because in some way that must have contributed very heavily to the evolutionary history of life on the planet.
But how do we know how things are going to respond to climate change unless we go back in the fossil record and find out how they react to climate change? So we can make all the predictions we want, but the predictions have to be based on data, and the data is in the fossil record.
The discovery of the impact as the cause of the Cretaceous-Paleogene extinction was a great example of a multidisciplinary study. They started with paleontology and stratigraphy, the existence of an impact, and a local stratigraphy, this one layer of clay among limestone that bracketed the boundary, and brought in chemistry and physics and so forth to find what seems to be the primary solution, maybe not the only, it's definitely not the only change going on, but probably the primary cause of the extinction. Or
you can't underestimate the amount of knowledge and the predictive models we can develop from understanding the fossil record.
Although the fossils will give you the evidence of the pattern of the extinction and the phenomenon itself, they won't necessarily give you the cause. And most of the evidence for a cause is going to be independently derived from the geological record. So the geochemists, the geophysicists, and so forth, who can look for tracers in the fossil record, or in the geologic record, of some phenomenon or phenomena occurring at a given interval of time that might be indicators of some major environmental change.
To gain an accurate understanding of paleontology in America, I also needed to ask people my own age what they thought about the field. Luckily, I was one of the TAs for the Dinosaurs class in spring 2013, so I asked some of my students to help me out and tell me what they thought about the field.
My name is Shay Lawson, and I just graduated in May 2013, so I was a history major.
My name is Jenna Lesser, I'm a biology major, and I'm a junior.
My name is Connor Kenahan, I'm an econ major, sophomore at Hopkins.
It's really interesting. My mom told me that when I was 3, my favorite movie was Jurassic Park. And that's quite an unusual movie for a 3-year-old to be watching all the time. So I guess I've always just been fascinated by it.
Well, when I was very little, there was a definite Dinosaurs fascination. I had all the pop-up books. Loved the Magic School Bus one when I went back and saw the dinosaurs. I don't know, it was... I was always a bit into nature, and I suppose the big nature, the glorified, supercharged nature, which is dinosaurs, I suppose, was especially interesting. And
I really didn't know much about it going into it, didn't know much about dinosaurs at all, or even the field behind it. So it's just something like, I knew the name. I knew it was called paleontology. You go out on digs, not much beyond that.
I guess everything I knew about paleontology probably came from Jurassic Park. Digging through layers of rock to find fossils. I had heard, dinosaurs are related to birds, and I didn't really know how, so it was really cool that was a topic we obviously touched upon in class.
I knew the names and the appearances of some of the more common dinosaurs. T-Rex, Stegosaurus, Ankylosaurus, Parasaurolophus, those, but as far as anatomy goes, or anything beyond just what they looked like and what their names were, nothing much.
I know a few interesting things that kind of caught me off guard. One thing was how you divide dinosaurs based on their characteristics, and based on that, I would think that the big dinosaurs, long-necked dinosaurs like Brachiosaurus, those kind of dinosaurs, you think they'd be closer to the other herbivores, kind of that you think of like Stegosaurus and Triceratops. But oddly enough, they're actually closely related to T-Rex and theropods. That's the big group, so that's something that you really wouldn't expect just going into it, something you gotta learn once you get in there.
As hard as they are to kind of grasp at first and to memorize, the cladograms, just kind of seeing where everything fit together and seeing the big picture at the very end when I was taking my final and I put one giant cladogram and it expanded out and I had to use 3 pieces of paper. I think the overall seeing the connections was really cool for me.
My perspective on dinosaurs was definitely changed. It was widened, it was deepened for sure. I don't like them any less after the class is done. I think I've come to appreciate them for more than just being massive and beautiful.
I think that life in general and how things work together so intricately, and it's such a kind of perfect process that a lot of it we don't understand. I think it's just fascinating, and obviously dinosaurs were using the same processes that we use today, maybe a little bit different than exactly what we use, but pretty much exactly the same.
It requires a level of patience and passion that most people just can't. Most people would just be tired of.
But really taking this course, you don't just learn about dinosaurs, you learn about the entire process from start to finish. You go out on the digs, you find what you can find, what's left behind, if there's fossils or, you know, whatever you find, egg nests. I know that was another big one that's that you get a lot of information from that, but you have to be able to spot those things, and not just spot them, but also be able to take care of them in such a way as to transport them back to wherever you're going to display them. I mean, it's a lot of things go into this, a lot of pre-planning and hard work and coordination. It's not just one person going out there and digging, it's an entire team, and a lot of that requires a lot of logistics. And so really, I mean, it's not just scientists going out there like we just know science and we just know what we know. It's like you actually have to be well-rounded. You have to think about certain things at all times.
But even the experts have their favorites. Ever wonder what they were? Mine has always been Brachiosaurus.
Oh, that's an easy question.
Oh, jeez.
I don't know, that changes from time to time.
Well, no, it's not an easy question.
My favorite dinosaur is actually a harder question to answer than I'd like to admit.
Okay, my favorite dinosaur will come as a surprise to probably no one who knows my research career is Tyrannosaurus rex, which among other things, my first two initials are the same as Tyrannosaurus rex. And I felt that was a sign early on, or at least I think I felt that was a sign early on.
I have no idea.
Pachycephalosaurus.
So I would say, in a way, my favorite dinosaur is the next one that I had a hand in studying. But if you really want to know my favorite dinosaur, it's a thing called Zelmoxis.
I don't think that they butted heads like rams do, like sheep do, you know, bighorn sheep.
I guess Baryonyx is a really cool dinosaur.
Okay, I have to know other people's favorite. Peter Dodson?
Well, my favorite dinosaur has to be one that I named. And the first dinosaur I named, that's a horned dinosaur, it's very close to my heart, is Abuceratops.
Is any dinosaur I can get a lot of. So.
The taxa I like the most are the ones that you have abundant samples of, so I'm particularly fond of species like Protoceratops and Psittacosaurus.
Maiasaura was a dinosaur I named many years ago that I really like because we have its eggs, its embryos, its juveniles, the adults, we've got its footprints and nests and eggs and egg nesting grounds. I mean, coprolites, we've got, you know, it is a dinosaur we know more about than any other.
And I remember I put Allosaurus because really it's interesting. When I was little, I just, you know, T-Rex, I had the vision of T-Rex in my head, and that's the only dinosaur that looks like that. When you get more in depth into dinosaurs and you see the little differences between them, you know, you actually see a lot of them look like that, and then there's a difference here, a difference there. So Allosaurus, you would just kind of group it together with T-Rex if you didn't know any better.
I guess I don't have a favorite dinosaur. How about that? I like a lot of them. But ornithopods are my favorite taxa.
Oh, okay.
Ornithopods.
That the people in the media want to know what you're doing, but they don't really take the time to actually try and understand what you're doing. And their time's limited, and their goals are different from my goals.
Mm-hmm.
So you end up with, in some cases, people or coverage that you don't really care for as a scientist. And other times it seems okay.
You know, as we keep confronting the fossil record and finding new things, we constantly revise and edit, renew, and sometimes completely overturn the working hypotheses we have.
Challenging aspect of paleontology is coming up with a great idea to test, but not having sufficient evidence to test it.
I've liked working in Montana and finding good stuff. I don't particularly like getting kicked off the properties very much.
We can always come up with more questions or new ways to ask the same questions, and the other factor, of course, is that we're very much a discovery-driven field. So,
for NSF, I think the programs that I would apply to, they've gone down to 8%. So that's 8% of all proposals received for a particular panel are successful in getting money. That's not very good. No.
I know I'd like to see more funding, but that's probably what everybody says always.
Well, you'd always struggle for getting funding, writing proposals, but lately, probably because of the glut of proposers for grants, the success rate at which you sort of throw your grant into the pool of other grants, the success rate has gone down.
And if people give you money and you don't do anything and you blow it or you waste it away, then you're not going to be a big name in paleo or big name anywhere.
True.
And nobody's going to give you any more. So, you have to come up with a good project. Mm-hmm. It has to be interesting. The product has to be interesting.
When I first started out as a PhD student, I got an NSF grant to help me out with my dissertation work. And that was it wasn't easy, but it was easier than it got to be shortly thereafter.
National Science Foundation, some of the federal outfits, when you go to them with a full-blown proposal that has taken you months to write, even if they like it, they'll come back and say, well, we love it, but we don't have much money. Could you do it for half as much money? And the only answer you can give them is, if I could have done it for half, I would have written it for half. When you go to a private person, almost inevitably, they will say, are you sure this is enough? Because they're interested in the project.
And this was like the second or third go-round that I went to NSF for, and they turned me down, and I thought, I could probably try and raise money other ways to do research. And also I was writing a book at the time, and so I was busy writing as opposed to doing museum research. And so I never got back on the horse.
Is most of your funding private then, or?
All of it.
All of it is private?
Yep.
Wow.
National Geographic is another one. There used to be a lot more sort of lower level funders that you could apply for, but that seems to be curtailing it itself as well.
The Jurassic Foundation has provided 286 grants to students and early career professionals in 22 countries, totaling nearly $700,000. Grants, yeah. It would be nice to see more jobs for the students who are coming up through the ranks now, right? Because there's a huge amount of students, and I know there aren't enough jobs for them.
I hope that I'm going to be part of a rather large research program to be funded by NSF. I certainly wouldn't turn that down.
I think we need to explore non-traditional academic jobs for paleontologists a lot more. There's a lot of other things out there that people with a paleontology degree can do, besides just academic positions. I don't remember facing any discrimination through my whole career as a paleontologist. When I started in paleontology, there weren't many women at all. There were very few senior researchers who were female. There were still very few female graduate students in paleontology. It's changed a lot since then. It's probably half women now.
The field of dinosaur studies has exploded, just exploded. So much so that it is impossible to keep up. It is utterly impossible to keep up.
Even though dinosaur paleontology has been going on since 1824, basically, we're so far from answering fundamental questions, and so being able to ask questions and try and solve questions and new questions pop up, that's great. That's healthy for science, I would think.
You have to understand that over 99% of all organisms that have lived on this earth are now extinct. I mean, what you have today is obviously of great importance to you and me and in society, but most of everything that's ever lived is extinct. And so if we have to put ourselves into a context, a deeper time context and understanding, life on Earth, we need to understand the fossil record. And so in some ways, we provide a different but equally important context to that which our colleagues in molecular biology or the study of genetics do for understanding life on Earth.
I'm looking at the tree of life. Where are the biggest gaps right now?
There's nothing that I really want to know, but I mean, if I wanted to know it, that's what I would be pursuing.
I was the first one to bring rigorous quantitative techniques to studies of this sort.
And so we're talking 400 plus million years ago in this case, basically between about 400 and 500 million years ago. We're seeing the origin of jaws, we're seeing the origin of paired fins, we're seeing the origins of heads, basically. I mean, all these at different stages in this long evolutionary history.
We're working sort of on the Chinese portion of the Gobi Desert in northwestern Gansu.
There's so much that happened in sort of the establishment of the vertebrate body plan during that time frame.
Gansu has one of the most important and rapidly expanding dinosaur faunas in China. It's hard to hold a candle to Liaoning in northeastern China, where all the feathered dinosaurs are coming from. We don't quite have that, but we have an almost explosively increasing dinosaur fauna.
Well, I have lots of projects, and I'm excited, equally excited about all of them. I don't have a pet project. I do have the Dino Chicken project going on, which is developmental biology. I've got postdocs working on that.
In my 2007 book, I specifically used the case of dinosaur colors as something we will almost certainly never know. Well, thankfully I put that almost, because we actually have a couple of techniques that have been developed recently that help people to potentially get out the issue of color.
I think the field is going to expand from pure academia from here on.
It's one of these kind of projects where there's no way to predict how long it'll take. If we're really lucky, we'll get it in the next couple of years. If we're really unlucky, it may take a decade or two.
Were dinosaurs undergoing a decline worldwide prior to the extinction event? Well, that requires multiple successive formations or faunas at multiple spots on the Earth leading up to that extinction event. But the problem is we either do not have or have not yet properly identified or correlated these faunas in different parts of the world.
Once we can do this, once we can actually make a bird with a tail, we will have the genetic tools to make all sorts of things.
I think there's a lot of technologies that can be applied, and a lot of technologies as they come out are going to be applied to paleontology. And, it's already not like it was when I was a student.
Now, hopefully with more effort to discover new localities in various spots of the world, we'll begin to fill that in. In fact, there's ongoing work now in continental Africa towards the very end of the age of dinosaurs, so we'll start to get continental Africa in on this, and hopefully some of the Madagascar expeditions will find earlier time slices to sort of come up to that ending of the age of dinosaurs and so forth. So
I hope we learn more about the origin of the vertebrate body plan.
So nowadays it would be really difficult for someone to be a true polymath, a true expert in lots of different fields. But it still behooves people to be an expert in one field with an interest in a lot of fields and the ability and willingness to talk with people in other fields, to team up and work on big projects across disciplines, because that's where the interesting answers are going to come from.
And we really don't know what we're going to find. We hope we come back with interesting stuff. If not vertebrates, we'll come back with invertebrates, and there'll be people interested in what we discover and so forth. But if we can find some well-preserved fossils that could inform some of those questions about what was happening with the vertebrate body plan between 400 and 500 million years ago, it would be terrific. It would fulfill sort of another dream of adding more to that sort of establishment of the understanding that tree of life.
I was thunderstruck by the beautiful fossils that are in the Gobi.
It goes beyond just dinosaurs. I think connecting to environmental science and sort of adding that deep time component to environmental science is one of the things that paleontology and earth science, more specifically, can do, and I think that's a good perspective.
We never think of ourselves as history, but the thing is, we are a part of history.
I think that life in general and how things work together so intricately, and it's such a kind of perfect process that a lot of it we don't understand.
It's the collective history of us, right? It's the collective history of our planet. Life, right? It's a history of life on our planet. And I think that's so fascinating.
Everything is connected in an evolutionary concept, in an ecological concept. We all share so much, and we can look at those connections. To me, that's a beautiful thing, to begin to understand our evolutionary connections and our ecological connections.
But I think the most important thing is to have a really open mind and attempt to remove as many preconceived ideas as a person can have. Therefore, being ready to make a discovery.